Sometimes joy comes wrapped in sadness. Charlie Rutherford spins that pearl of wisdom, among other things. We spend the first half of the interview talking about his active lifestyle and what led to a fateful day and an extremely big decision, one of which most of you have never had to make. And then we had an unbelievable conversation. So enjoy. Okay, so we've got Charlie Rutherford, as I know him, from Boveda. Charlie, thanks so much for giving us some time.
Thanks, Seth, for having me.
You are also Charles P. Rutherford II.
That's right. Yes, that's right. It sounds regal, doesn't it?
It sounds extremely regal.
I don't know how I got it. Well, I do know how I got it. My mom begged my dad, but he was against it because he didn't want people calling me Junior, because my mom had a cousin that everyone called Junior, and he had questionable hygiene habits, and so my dad didn't want me associated with that, and so but she begged and begged and begged, and just like most women and smart men, he gave her what she wanted.
Yeah, you are setting up what that relationship is. Well, I will concur with that. What's the P stand for?
That'd be Peter.
Oh, okay. And then there's Chuck, and there's Chaz, and there's Chip, and there's Chipper.
And there's Chachi.
Well, right, but I was leaving that one out on purpose. Charlie, we're trying to tell a story here.
Okay. Sorry that I stepped on your story.
So if you can, I mean, we have a little bit of, we know each other, at least a little bit, and so that's why why I'm messing with you, I guess. No, but Chachi kind of plays a significant role in one of the bigger stories that you have to tell, and I want to make sure to get into the background a little bit, and then explain why I was leaving Chachi out on purpose. Does that make sense?
Very good.
Okay, so Wayzata, Minnesota.
Yeah.
That's where you are now, or that's where you're from?
That's right. I'm in the underground command center of Boveda, which is below ground in an unspecified location. That may actually even just be the area that we say that we're in. Mm-hmm. Yes, I'm here at the office, and that's about 15 minutes out of just west of downtown Minneapolis, where I live.
Got it. And we're going to get into Boveda and what you do for them. This is your second go around, so we'll discuss both. And then, so how far are Boveda headquarters from Wayzata?
It's smack dab in Wayzata, right here on Lake Minnetonka. If you're familiar with not familiar with the area, it's Minnesota says we have 10,000 lakes, but just like about everything else, we were just being modest because we've got about 11,000, and so it's kind of in the middle of a bunch of lakes. So it's gorgeous spot to be able to drive in the morning and drive in or ride in. I often ride my bike the 15 miles to work. It's just a gorgeous ride when you get to see the trees and the lakes and the sailboats and all that. So it's really a great way to just reset the brain on the way to and on the way from the office.
First off, I love the Midwest modesty of it's 10,000 lakes. It's really 11,000, but it's 10,000.
Yeah.
All right. Well, so you're driving into work, but you spend a fair amount of time on your bike.
I do, yeah. Yeah, and it used to be motorcycle, but I've really fallen in love with biking, and it had been mountain biking, and it is still some of that. But all the stuff on this direction is paved trails that I can kind of clip along on a mountain bike at about 15 miles an hour for about an hour and change that it takes me to get here or get home. And so it's a good little workout in the morning and on the way back, and not to mention that on one of the main thoroughfares, there's some serious construction that's going to be starting here for a couple months. So instead of sitting in my car for an hour each morning, I figured that to be outside and smelling the fresh air and working the muscles a little bit would be a good idea. So it's a heck of a lot better than sitting in a metal can.
There you go. And you're an active guy, and we're going to go through your sporting past for reasons which will be made obvious in a minute. But so you've got the biking, and you've been biking for your whole life. Did you start with the BMX stuff?
Yeah, that's right. When I was 8 years old, BMX racing and bikes have always been a part of my life.
Okay. And then, so where, if you start with biking, where does your sporting history go? Take us through it.
I think that it first did start with biking. I can remember having Smokey and the Bandit was my favorite movie when I was about 3, and I think that I vividly remember being in my mom's garden on my trike, spinning out like the Bandit did, and
Sure.
just always remember, skidding or doing wheelies or doing jumps on anything from big wheels to trikes to motorcycles to mountain bikes. And, I played baseball, football, basketball, hockey, golf, downhill skiing. I did all of these different sports because my folks really encouraged us to try a bunch of things to see what would stick. Well, it happened that most of them did stick. And so I played most of them at high levels throughout virtually every age, but I was better at getting kicked off of teams than I was at making teams, and it was generally tobacco violations, either getting caught smoking in the woods on the ski hill or getting caught in power volleyball 4 with the chew in my mouth. And so that's probably something that I would redo, because I missed a lot of things and screwed up a lot of stuff by being stupid with tobacco. And I say that as I have my first cigar of the day lit in front of me right now.
Oh, you do? You're already smoking a cigar. Fantastic. Amazing.
Yeah.
So, and Boveda has something to do with that, but I want to make sure to tick these off, each of these sports appropriately. And I also want to make sure that folks know that Smokey and the Bandit features not only Burt Reynolds and Dom DeLuise and Sally Field, but also Jackie Gleason. So if you haven't seen it, please do. Is that fair?
Man, he made that movie. That is, fantastic. Reminds me, I got to watch that this weekend.
There you go. All right, so baseball, what position was that?
First base.
Okay, and you are left-handed?
No, I'm right-handed.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I'm right-handed. I had a little bit of range. I've always been a little bit taller for my age, so I had a good stretch. I could just about get into the splits. I think that was probably part of the reason that my infielders were able to throw a few guys out, because I was able to reach the ball in that split second faster. Wasn't really a great hitter. I don't consider myself that. I feel like I was on base more often than anything, but it wasn't until playing softball 5-6 years ago that I was hitting home runs. So I wouldn't say that I was a super strong hitter, but I was a great fielder, and I knew the game and where the ball needed to get.
Okay. Volleyball, you were on the court there, right? What were you good at in volleyball?
I was great at serving, and I had a pretty good spike. Like I said, I had some range, so I was able to pick up some balls off the sand and off the court.
And you've got, I guess, at least enough height to be able to spike, right? How tall are you?
Yeah, because I don't really have that. I'm 6'1". I don't have that great of a vertical, but the nice thing is that once you realize that you don't have to be standing at the net to hit an aggressive shot, you just have to hit it right, hit it well. You could kind of in some ways spike from just about anywhere on the court, or hit it aggressively anyway.
Okay. And then tennis, though, that spanned from when you were younger through to when you were older. Is that right?
I think that's the first game I ever recall playing, in part because it all started based on a lie.
Uh-huh.
We had tennis courts, about 8 tennis courts right behind our house in Fargo, North Dakota. And when I went down there to register for my first day or play my first day, they're doing a roll call, and they say, Charlie Rutherford, and all the other kids start giggling. And they start calling me Charlie Barley. And so immediately, in what I think is my first ever example of lying to people to try to get them to like me better, I then
Mhm.
corrected, in quotation marks, the instructor and told him, "Oh, I'm sorry, they must have that wrong. My name is Jeff," because I thought that name was cool, and it also worked that there weren't a lot of things that rhymed with Jeff. So
Right.
for a day or two, I was Jeff until my mom came to watch. And as we're out there on the court and I'm hitting serves or volleys or something like that, the instructor says, "Great job, Jeff. Way to go." And so I go and sit down next to my mom during a break, and she said, "Honey, why do they call you Jeff?" And
Right.
yeah, I sheepishly tell her that it was because these kids were making fun of me. And so as the instructor comes over and is talking to my mom and I, she says, "I think he's got something to tell you." I said, "My name isn't really Jeff, it's Charlie. Older kids were making fun of me." And he goes, "Oh,
Right.
listen, Charlie is a much cooler name than Jeff."
Right.
So also my first example of somebody, once again, probably lying to me to make me feel better.
Sure. Yeah, we all do, Charlie. We all do.
Including
All
you,
right.
especially you.
Yes, exactly. Best example of that. Yeah, no, that's so interesting that you've felt the need to just, drastically change who you were where do you think that comes from? That you just did not want to, I mean, because all kids kind of experience getting made fun of. Why were you not interested in putting up with it kind of thing?
It's so funny what is ever programmed into a human being's genes, because that was the first thing: make the pain stop, right? And
Right.
whether even that low level of pain, and how do I make that stop? Well, let's change my name. And I felt like I had that power to do that. So I think whatever is ingrained in the human spirit of wanting to be liked, loved, accepted, not made fun of, and then lying for personal gain, I experienced all those emotions in about 3 seconds.
All right, I want to make sure to get through all the sports here. I guess a little bit later, pick up football.
I did. I was a punter and I was a wide receiver. Played a little bit of quarterback, but I was never a great football player. I wasn't really running guys down, but I could catch a ball, throw a ball, and kick a ball.
Got it. And then golf and skiing are the big ones, right? I mean, skiing you were on the team, right?
That's right. I was the captain of the downhill ski team at Blaine High School, which is kind of like saying I was a really tall Smurf, because Blaine isn't known for skiing, and skiing around here would make most people on either coast laugh. But
Huh.
yes, I was the captain of the downhill slalom race team. Was on the team when I was in ninth grade, which I don't know has probably been done before or since. But yeah, skiing's always been a fun part of my life. It was one of those things. Virtually everything I got into was with my dad, and so instead of hunting or fishing, we were playing golf in the summer, and instead of ice fishing or hunting in the winter, we were downhill skiing. And so those were ways that I was able to spend time with my dad, who I love, impossibly love. And so it was fun to be able to hang out with him, spend time with him, be able to do things that we enjoyed doing together. And even this last weekend, for example, we were walking 18 holes together. So my life education has come 18 holes at a time walking with my dad. It's been invaluable, and I will miss it terribly someday when it has to end.
All right. Well, then let's reel off a few Charles P. Rutherford the First pearls of wisdom. What comes to mind?
Well, I think the most recent, because I somehow last Friday, 2 Fridays ago, found myself engaged, is that every person is the wrong person. And that sounds negative, but it's, I think, realistic. Everyone is going to have tensions and challenges. It's just a matter of whether or not you want to choose whether that set of challenges, or otherwise called problems or tensions, is the one that you want to create a life with. And thankfully for me, I've chosen well than somebody that fits with me so great. But there will be tensions and there will be things. And so to know ahead of time that everyone's the wrong person saves you from the disappointment of feeling, crap, I married the wrong person.
Hmm.
So that I think is pretty darn valuable. And this is coming from a guy that's been happily married to my mom for 40 years, coming up on 41 years, a couple days after the day I get married. And they've been marriage counselors, marriage mentors for probably 30 of that. And so they know a little bit about marriage. And so coming from my father, I'm listening because he knows a heck of a lot more than I do.
All right. Well, we got to take the tangent. You just got engaged and you're going to get married, and congratulations.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
But okay, so Dad, kind of gave you the key principles here. Anything aside from that, anything, related to the larger picture for yourself? Well, I guess you can't get bigger than that, picking a mate. But anything else that's on that list?
There probably isn't any subject that we haven't covered, from business to friendships to family relationships to navigating tricky things within all of those subjects. We talk cars all the time. He's a car guy. I love my cars. He's such a well-rounded, and he's got a breadth of knowledge on a number of things. And he's probably one of the better inquisitors / conversationalists in the world, because he's amazing at asking questions. And so that's a spot where I try to take a lot of, get a lot of suggestions, because he's amazing at it. There isn't anyone that he doesn't come across that doesn't love him. And he does a lot of things. He's been an entrepreneur for years, but he's also an ordained pastor. And so he's going to be officiating my wedding with my fantastically fetching fiance Jen here in another month.
Well,
month from today. Holy mackerel.
There you go. There you go. All right, so we're going to get into the pastor thing in a different way, but you said you walked 18 holes with your father. You went skiing with him. Let's get back to you being on the ski team, because this is that where you kind of found tobacco as a friend, if you will?
No, sadly, I found tobacco as a friend in my buddy Jeremy Holstein's mom and dad's ashtray at their house. So we're kids. We're probably 9 or 10 years old. His mom and dad are working. We're playing football. We'd go inside, and they had ashtrays all over the place. And they would smoke half a cigarette and then leave it or put it out. So we'd steal butts from the ashtray, and we'd first start puffing on them, and then we realized, hey, if you swallow it, it comes out your nose. And then we're coughing, but it was really cool to have it come out of your nose. And then I think it graduated into stealing packs of cigarettes from his mom's freezer, and we stashed them in a plastic bag down by the river. So we'd go down by the river and we'd smoke cigarettes. And I mean, that started at the age of 9 or 10. I am mildly embarrassed to admit that it probably was the age of 14 or 15 that for the next 20 years, I was never without a pack of cigarettes on me.
Uh-huh. And you've told me that that's a regret, that whole thing.
It is. I mean, when I mentioned that there was a lot that I missed, oftentimes we grew up on a golf course. And so on a Saturday morning, my dad would say, let's go play golf. Okay, Pop, let's go play golf. But then by the 9th hole, here I am nicking out, and I want to stay and play with my dad, but I also want to go and have a cigarette. You don't just tell your dad when you're 16 years old, hey, Pop, I'm going to go for a smoke break. So I'd make something up. I'm tired, I'm hungry, I don't feel like playing, and I'd walk home. And so as a young man, I missed hours and hours of time with my dad just because I wanted to rush home and go over to my friend's place where I knew his mom and dad were gone so we could smoke cigarettes.
And also, it took you away from the field of play, whether it was skiing or baseball or volleyball or tennis, right? Or do I have that wrong?
No, you've got that right. I was suspended from every team for those tobacco violations. Some of them I didn't go back to. Skiing was the only one that never suspended me because it really, really needed me on the team. So I just got a talking to a couple times.
All right, so we've set this up appropriately. We've got an accomplished sportsman here. Biking, skiing, golf, football, baseball, volleyball, tennis. We've got a little bit of a vice of tobacco, but who doesn't have a vice or two? Let's spring forward from your sporting past. You go into motorcycles. What took you from biking, the pedal bike, to the motorcycle?
I always wanted a motorcycle. I had friends that had mini bikes or scooters or something fun to do in the dirt, and I really wanted one, but I never got one. And so after I graduated from high school, had some graduation money, tried to go to college, hated it, wasn't for me, didn't feel like it was for me, in part because I had a girlfriend back at home that I was head over heels for in all the wrong ways, couldn't trust her. I ended up coming back after almost my first semester of college at North Dakota State University. Well, I had a buddy that was big into motorcycles, wanted to start racing, and that friend that had an additional buddy that was selling his motorcycle. So I had leftover graduation money, and what better way to spend it than on a motorcycle? And so my first motorcycle was a race bike. We went to Topeka, Kansas. We went through the new riders course and then entered races that were happening there in Topeka in the novice category. And my friend took first and I took second in all the races. We then came back to Minnesota, signed up for the local racing just an hour or two north of Minneapolis. And he went out there and was falling down all the time, so I was winning all the races. And so I'm coming home with all of these trophies, and my folks are thinking, what the heck is all of this about? So they decided to come and visit their first race, and my mother cried the entire race because you've got 50 guys all barreling for the first turn at Brainerd International Raceway at about 160 miles an hour, bouncing off of each other. You've got guys on your elbows and your knees. And I ended up winning that race, and my mom comes running over and she's bawling, tells me great job, but it was so scary. And then from that time on, they never missed another race.
And was that an exaggeration, or is it really a $160? You're traveling that fast?
Well, those were the slow bikes. I ended up the next year, 2 years after that, jumping up a class. My first year, I accrued enough points to get my professional license, so I made as many of the professional races here in the States as sponsorship money would allow. After 2 years on a 600, I went to a 750, and we went barreling into there at about 185 on 750s.
Excellent. And so you literally were a pro you were pro.
Yeah, that's right. The only difference between me and the other guys was that, or a number of the other guys anyway, is that they had full sponsorship and they were traveling and they were making money at it. I was never making money at it, but I was in the same races. So it's finishing, 10th, 12th out of 25 guys, something like that. So I was never quite fantastic at it. But again, I was racing against guys that grew up on a bike. My first motorcycle was my race bike at the age of 18. So at 21, to be competing with guys that were making a living at it was, I guess, something.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And do you think, that plays into the competitive spirit of all of the sports and, being in action, or what is that? Is that from your dad? Is that from your mother? Is it the competitive spirit? Why do you find yourself in competition so much?
I think that the very first taste of competition that stuck so well in my mind was when we were riding bikes. There were girls at the park. There was a bunch of kids. I wasn't the same age as these older girls. And there was this jump that nobody else would hit. And I decided that I would give it a whirl, and I happened to land it, and it impressed the girls. And so that was my first taste of what competition can get you, and it has never left. Thankfully, it's never left.
The spoils.
Right. Yeah, I think there is a little bit something that in a vacuum I would probably like to win, but let's
Right.
face it, part of the reason of winning are the accolades, and so that was just I liked to do things well. Thankfully, I was blessed with a brain and a body that adapted quickly to different sports, and a
Hmm.
lot of them just came naturally.
So okay, so you're competing professionally. You're kind of finishing in the middle of the pack, and I would imagine you kind of backed away from that, but kept the bike, right?
Well, I didn't choose to back away. There was a race that was happening in Minnesota, and I was leading, and I was a little bit careless, and I was sliding into a turn, kind of showing off, and I fell down. And the pack of bikes behind us, about five of them ran off the track, and one of them accidentally aimed for me. And right as I was getting up off the ground, I literally would have gotten up, ran over to the bike, picked it up, hopped back on it, and tried to get as far through the pack as I could in the remaining laps. But it ended up that one of these spooked bikes, as I'm laying on the ground, ready to get up, railroads me over my shoulder and my head.
Mm.
And as I'm twisting and twirling and coming to a stop again after being hit by this bike, I could swear that I see an arm go one direction and my helmet go another direction. And I'm laying there and I'm very conscious of the fact that I'm not getting up and it's scary and I'm not moving. And I'm seeing corner workers run up to me. And turns out that I get loaded onto an ambulance. And as I'm being after being put on the backboard in a neck brace, I'm still not moving. And I'm very aware of that fact. And I'm looking at the ceiling of the ambulance, and I was sure that that morning was the last time I'd ever brushed my own teeth, or the last time that I'd fed myself, and I'd never mow the lawn again, and I'd never walk again, and I'd never do. And it's mostly mundane things that I realized that I wouldn't do again. But miraculously, at the hospital, they gave me an X-ray, and nothing was broken. It turned out I only had a rotator cuff damage, and as I'm laying in the hospital and people are streaming through, crying, I start to slowly get feeling back, and my fingers start to move, and my toes start to move, and so I went in there on a backboard, and I ended up walking out with my arm in a sling, and the thinking was that my brain, my body, my something was just in shock, and that was a defense mechanism to try to keep it safe. So that
So
was the end of my racing because I spent the next number of months just rehabbing my shoulder, and my bike was in a ball in the garage, and that was the end. So it was a forced ending to my motorcycle racing career.
what's the lesson from thinking for a while that you're paralyzed? What's that lesson?
There are so many things to be thankful for every day, and I that was the first time anyway that I was reminded about being gracious and showing gratitude, whether it's to a god or just to the stars or whatever that thing is, but just having a heart of gratitude that I'm able to walk, to see, to hold things, to light a cigar, to drink my coffee, to talk to you. And it was a great reminder of all the things that you have to be thankful for on a daily basis, even when there's crap that's happening.
All right, let's go from accident to accident. Next accident up.
I think I think we could fast forward a number of years to about 5 years ago, 3, 4, 5 years ago, in 2012, new Ducati motorcycle that I proceed to crash in the spring. I break my shoulder blade in 4 places. I was off the bike for about 3 or 4 weeks, and then the day before my birthday, late September, I'm on the track. It wasn't a competition; it was just a track day. Somebody had sprayed brake fluid all over the track by accident, and I found it and tumbled down the track after crashing, which smacked my feet on the pavement, and so I broke both of my feet, tore both of my knees open. It was a really solid crash.
That's that's uh,
Um,
that's great. All right, so now we've got the first one. You think you're paralyzed, you're not. We've got the second one is the shoulder blade. We've got the third one. You did break your feet,
yeah.
right? Okay.
That's right. Yes, I decided against surgery. Well, actually, not having insurance at the time helped me decide against the surgery, and so I slowly healed over 10 weeks, where Boveda was kind enough to let me work from home for 10 weeks because I was in a wheelchair, and being here in our underground bunker, a one level down, is only stairs. And of all the things that I've done on wheels and jumps, I wasn't ready to take a wheelchair down a flight of 25 stairs. So
All
I,
right.
and then in 2013, brand new Ducati motorcycle again, best bike I've ever owned, most fun. And I'm 4 blocks away from home on a gorgeous summer June 26th afternoon. And I live a couple blocks away from Target Field where the Twins play. And I was going home to mountain bike and then figure out what I wanted to do for dinner. And as I rounded a corner, there was a car coming at me that wanted a parking spot on my side of the street. And not seeing me, he swung a left, or what was going to be a U-turn, right into my path as I'm 15 feet from the front of his SUV. So I did my best to maneuver around it as quick as I could, and I just about made it. But I hit the car, and my left leg was between the car and the bike for that split second when I hit it. I took the bumper off the car, I hit the curb, I flung off onto the sidewalk, and my bike ended up in the parking spot that he was after. So I guess you could say that in my final race, I did win it. And once again, for the second time in my life, I'm very consciously aware that I'm not getting up off the ground, and I've got this severe sensation in my lower left leg. And as luck or good fortune or blessings would have it, one of the people that was on their way walking to the game a couple blocks away was a nurse, and so she stabilized my leg, and other bystanders helped get my helmet, my gloves, my jacket off because it was kind of a warm day. I'm asking anybody if they've got water, so I've got people pouring water into my mouth, and then I hear sirens coming from what felt like every direction. And I'm holding people's hands because I know something's wrong. I don't know how bad this is, because after breaking my feet the year before, I got these super heavy duty boots that came up to about my knees, thinking that they'd be the safest option, and they probably were, but there isn't any boot that's rated for defense against an SUV.
Right.
And so I'm loaded onto the ambulance, and once again, I'm looking at the ceiling of this ambulance, and I'm going, man, my life changes every time I get into one of these machines. And I go off to the hospital, and I'm very awake. They cut my clothes off me. I'm really glad that I took my mom's suggestion that day and did wear clean underwear. And they're trying to get my boot off me, but even the morphine isn't quite killing the pain. And so I'm hitting the roof each time they're trying to tug on this boot. And so that's when they put me under. So I also know what the effects of ketamine are, and it's no wonder the crazy kids are into that, because they could have done anything to me and I wouldn't have known. And I then wake up in a hospital bed, and I look down at my leg, and it's got an external fixator on it, which is like traction for your head when you break your neck, but it's traction for your foot when there's not much to hold it on. And it feels like moments later, a doctor came in and told me that asked me if I knew what had happened, and I ran her through the whole scenario. And I said, well, what now? She said, well, you have options. Well, your first option is we can keep it, but the blood, the tissue and the muscle and the bone all around it has been decimated. We kept your foot because you had just enough blood flow. When we'd squeeze your toes, blood would come back. They'd turn pink again. So we kept it so that we could give you these options. And so since the area is so damaged, we'd have to put a metal rod in there, and then we'd have to harvest the rest of the material from somewhere else on your body. What? We'd take bone from your hips, from your pelvis. We'd stick routers down your femur to take out bone fragments to make bone paste. We'd take muscle from your butt and from your chest and from your arms. We'd take skin from your back and from your stomach and from your sides to fix. Okay, so I'm with you here. And how many operations we talking to? Well, multiple operations. Okay, over what period of time? It could be months, it could be years, she says. I said, okay, great, but then I'm gonna mountain bike again. She says, no, you won't mountain bike again. Okay, but I'll ski. No, you're not gonna ski either. well, I'll at least golf. She said, no, you're not going to golf. You have to understand, this is a salvage operation. This is just to keep your foot. This isn't to give you the same quality of life that you had 5 hours ago. So I said, okay, well, you've said I had options, so give me the other one, because clearly that one's got to be better. And she said, well, there's always amputation. Whoa, what's that look like? And she said, well, with technology today, you'd have an amputation, and then in about 8 weeks, you'd be walking again, and you're going to do all those things that you just mentioned that you want to do. So I'm shaking my head here. I'm thinking, how the crap did I get here? 5 hours ago, it's mountain biking and then a fantastic dinner. Now it's bone grafts, skin grafts, muscle grafts over months or years, or amputation. And so I went to sleep crying and praying. And I said, Lord, I don't know how I got here. I'm really scared right now. Please help me through this, because I'm afraid. And so I woke up with this unmistakable peace that I've not felt before. And this phrase saying, it's just a foot, it's just a foot, it's just a foot. But I'm trying to have a conversation with this voice, and I'm saying, yeah, but it's a foot. And he's saying, no, it's just a foot. And so that was the moment that I realized that I want the best quality of life, the fewest chances of complication, and the quickest recovery. So those are the 3 questions that I asked the doctor when she came in. What's going to heal me the fastest, best chance of success, and the best quality of life? And she said, that's amputation. I said, all right, we're going to take this puppy off. So having saved the foot, I was able to buy time to find out there were different ways to do amputations, that one of the best guys in the country happened to be in Minneapolis. So I called him up, had him come down. He tried to talk me out of it for 45 minutes, because he said there's no way that people choose amputation right away. People usually try for a year or 2 or 3 or 5 to save their foot. They don't go right to amputation. And I said, listen, you don't know me. I'm not looking back. I'm looking forward. I don't want to live in recovery. I don't want to live in pain. I got stuff I still need to get done. I want to get on it. And so he didn't believe that that was my true thoughts. So he told me that I couldn't make that decision myself, since I was heavily medicated. So he talked to my father, who I'd already talked this through with. So my dad knew me well enough to know that this was parallel to my usual line of thinking, that this was going to be the best option. Because for me, again, it came down to those 3 very logical questions. So the doctor agreed, but this was right around the 4th of July holiday. So he had to schedule it for about 5 days later. So I decided that what better way to celebrate losing my foot than to throw a party. So I started a Facebook page. Come say, it was a farewell to Chachi's foot party. Come down, say your goodbyes, get your picture taken, because after 36 years of faithful service, we were going to have to sadly say goodbye. So I was overwhelmed by the outpouring of people that came down. About everybody that I'd ever known in my life came to the hospital, got their picture taken. I posted it to the page. We made it fun. This was going to be a story about victory. This wasn't going to be a sad story about loss and a guy whose life is ruined. We're going to make this story fun. And so it was going to be a celebration of my foot. So that's what we did. And then June 6th had the first of a 2-stage operation. And then June 7th was the final. And I think it was about a week later that I left the hospital to go recover at my folks' place, because I needed a little bit of extra care, because the worst thing that can happen is falling down, falling on the limb, and hurting it again. So I had a really thanks to my mom, who was built to be a mom, fantastic care. And 9 weeks later, I was walking, and then it ended up that 87 days after amputation, I was playing my first round of golf with my dad.
And so essentially, you just laid it out. You got exactly what you wanted. Less than 3 months later, you're on the golf course.
Yeah, and I was mountain biking that weekend too. All the things that I was hoping that amputation would be were, where I had periods at the end of sentences instead of question marks at the end of sentences, and I still had some healing and some sensitivity to go away. Some of it that hasn't, but at least it put the most periods at the end of as many sentences as possible.
Right.
so that I could get going back on my life in this new adventure of being an amputee. And the people that I've met through this, the people that came and counseled me in the hospital, as I was wondering what amputation looks like, what's the life of an amputee look like, was life changing. To share a certain fraternity with people that there's only a couple million people in the U.S. 365 more each day, though, that become amputees. And so to be part of that very special, in quotation marks, fraternity has been life-changing, and a certain fulfillment that I don't know that I would have gotten any other way.
Yeah. And you're paying that forward now as well, right? You do visits and things like that?
I quickly went from student to teacher, because in a very strange way, one of the guys that I was an acquaintance with, who 10 years ago was run over by a train after being mugged and left on some train tracks, started an organization called Wiggle Your Toes. And it's an organization that helps people adapt to life after limb loss. And some of that might be medical, some of it might be, but a lot of times it's injury. So I went quickly from being a student and a client, if you will, to being on the board and being one of the people that gets a phone call in case there's somebody like me who has a below the knee injury, who has or who likely will lose their foot, or who hasn't made the decision yet. And so those are the times that I feel like I'm using my gifts the best, when I can walk into a hospital room with a big dumb smile on my face and tell these people that there is life after this scene in their life's movie that they're seeing. Because the trick is to get your brain past where you are right now and to see what's going to happen in the future. And thankfully, when I can walk in and tell them that I mountain bike, I ski, I golf, I walk, I scuba dive, I do all of these things, there's a whole lot of hope that I think that brings to people's lives. And I've created some great friends, some amazing relationships out of that. And I'm thrilled to do that each time, because once again, I feel like I'm using my programming for the best purposes.
You mentioned earlier on, you said, anything to make the pain stop. That was a phrase that you had early on in this conversation and in your life. You also mentioned that they were giving you some pain medication, which absolutely was making the pain stop. And then you mentioned that you still are in even the process of healing. So connect the dots between make the pain stop. The pain was definitely stopping with the medication that they were giving, and the choice that you made with another medicine in terms of healing.
Not only was the Dilaudid, the morphine, the nerve medicines, I think a total, I've forgotten all of the alphabet names of them, but there was 8 or 9 different medications that I would take. I was up every 4 or 5 hours to take them on the schedules that I needed to take them. Not only did it kill the pain, it killed every emotion in me. I was not able to register or feel joy, sadness, disgust, embarrassment, fear. I wasn't able to feel anything. And so it was about 7 days after I got off my regimen of daily pain medication that all these emotions came rushing back at once. And I crumpled up, watched some movie with my folks because I was still recovering at their place. And I fell to the ground crying after this movie. And that's what kind of triggered it. I can't even remember what movie it was, but it was just sappy enough that this hard ass wasn't crying, but wouldn't usually cry. But I found myself on the ground bawling because I'm feeling all these emotions that I hadn't felt after the accident, where I was scared for the future. I was embarrassed because I looked like a freak. I was in pain. I was joyful that it wasn't worse. I was happy with what was left. And that was the day that I realized, man, as you wade into it, it's not scary. But once you're in it, you don't know what it's numbing or what it's killing or what it's preventing in your life. And so I needed it to sleep, but I didn't want to take it during the day. And that was that was painful, but I could at least stay distracted enough with TV or eventually going to the office as I'm working, that it wasn't debilitating. So after the first night of taking my one oxycodone pill and it didn't work, I didn't sleep. I tossed, I turned, I have phantom limb pain, which is pain in a limb that doesn't exist. So as real as I'm looking at my left shoe right now, I could swear there's still a foot in that shoe. And I could swear that it's mildly on fire. And that's what I live with all day, every day at the best. And the first pill doesn't work. I don't sleep that night. That goes by for 3 days. And then after I'm taking one a night, then I finally take two and I sleep. But then I realize that's not a road I want to go down, because I don't want to start knocking over the local 7-Eleven when that graduates into something more serious. So I'd been at Boveda at this point for a couple of years, and I got in touch with our distributor and I said, listen, I know that you people have been talking about this as medicine and you say patients. And I kind of rolled my eyes at that, even though we were operating in the cannabis storage space. I said, if this really is the thing that you say it is, tell me what I need, because I'm desperate. I haven't slept hardly in 3 days and my life is suffering for it. And so he suggested the few components that I need to put together, which I was able to get my hands on here in Minnesota. And my experience with marijuana before this was high school. I'd have fun for 5 minutes, get paranoid, and then threw up. So that was my impression of this medicine.
Right.
And it didn't sound a lot of fun to me. So I got the components, I put them together in a vaporizer. I hit it a little bit once, I set it down, I wait. Say, okay, all right, I get it. And then another time, and I wait 10 minutes, and okay, that's great. I'm a little tired. And then all of a sudden, the third time, I said, okay, it's time to turn the TV off. And I turn the TV off, and it feels like moments later that I woke up after 8 hours of the first solid sleep that I'd had in a really long time. And that was a victory. And that's the day that I went from skeptical about the medicinal properties to completely aware that at least there were some forms, some strains that were perfectly capable of getting rid of the phantom limb pain and the real pain of the healing that's happening after you have bone and skin and tissue cut off your body.
Right.
And so I quickly went to full-fledged supporter of at least the medicinal, and then also, because of the libertarian streak in me, the legalization for safe recreational purposes.
Right. So how did it change your relationship with work? So you're this pro racer, you work at Boveda for a little bit, you go into Rutherford, motorsports, and then you come back to Boveda, and only then, did you find, what they were doing with cannabis could be, helpful to you? How did it change the way that you, just do work every day? You mentioned that you've got a cigar lit already. Great, that's the tobacco side. But in terms of cannabis and Boveda, how did it change your whole mindset?
It's probably focused me more on cannabis than any of the other markets that we operate in, those being cigars and music and food. And so it's not only the fastest growing for us and the most exciting, but it's the one that I have a daily personal relationship with. And so for the second time in 2 years, Boveda was kind enough to let me work from the house for the 8 or 9 weeks before I was walking and able to make it to the office. But then it was probably about 6 months after that where I'd been on the oxycodone and then decided that I wanted to be done with that because I was having to take more of it to be able to sleep. And so I kept it quiet for a while. And there was always the joke here in the office about, oh, you must be smoking pot, or you must be smoking pot, or you must be. But then there was a time that we were at the cigar club and we were talking, and I just had maybe a nice scotch or two, and I said, hey guys, I got something to admit. And so I told them, and the first thing out of their mouth was good, I'm glad, I'm happy. I want you to have a great quality of life. Big deal. big deal that you have to inhale a plant at night in order to have relief and to have a solid quality of life and to be effective at your job. Because there are times where I'd roll in here and I hadn't slept for more than a couple hours, and just lack of sleep alone will make you hallucinate. And so I was not as effective as I should be, although they didn't necessarily detect that, but they just wanted me at my best, and they didn't want to see me in pain. So that's morphed into family that was against it, being taught that drugs are bad in high school or in grade school and high school, having family that is against it, but then all of a sudden having family that supports it when they have a personal case of someone in their life who I only do this at night in order to sleep. I don't happen to do this recreationally because I'm still afraid of the paranoid and throwing up. So I haven't tried anything else because I don't want to have that happen.
Right.
So now I've got grandparents, I've got aunts and uncles, and I've got parents who were against it, and now they're big believers in the efficacy of this as a medicine.
And what's you're coming from a community that doesn't, by definition support cannabis as medicine, and then you're describing your family members and close ones that do. What's your message to other communities, that just simply would not consider cannabis as medicine? Does it, is your advice that it takes someone in the group to kind of prove that message, or what would you say there?
I think in some ways, but also listen about the groups that I'm involved in, and you tell me if that fits somebody who's a very loyal and active marijuana supporter. I go to church every weekend with my fiance. I volunteer. This is my 5th year of volunteering at church on Wednesdays, leading small groups of young adults, high school young men, trying to be an additional mentor in their life. I am a lifetime member of the NRA. I don't go anywhere without legally carrying a gun. I am on the board of a couple different charities. That's not somebody that you think of as a marijuana supporter, but I am. And so I have an interesting personal experience with it. And I also come from some groups that most people would think wouldn't be a marijuana supporter. So I think that maybe in some ways I might have a chance of saying, listen, of being very authentic and credible when I say, listen, there are people that can use this responsibly. People like me who folks would not guess, because when you think somebody is a marijuana supporter, you have a certain stereotype in your brain. You don't look at a professional guy that has more activities than most able-bodied people do, who gets up at 6 o'clock in the morning to have breakfast with his fiance before he rides his bike to work and then goes golfing on the weekend. You don't think of that as a marijuana person, especially when they're going to church a couple times in the week in the middle of all that. So I hope that there is listen, there's an old thinking attached to most of this that are the stigmas, that a lot of people that probably didn't like their neighbors or their friends or the people in college that were the hippies. And there's still some of that exists. But when there are responsible people using it either as medicine or recreationally, especially when those things hit closer to home, because so many scenarios are about what side of the fence you stand on. And if you are like a lot of my family, and then all of a sudden you see me having a continued successful life because of the medicine that he uses at night, especially in light of all the people that die from the types of drugs that I was taking, that has the ability to change the hearts and minds.
There you go. Give us a sense of on the ground what's happening in Minnesota as far as cannabis legislation and regulation from your perspective, from the patient's perspective.
July 1st, cannabis in a concentrated form will be available to people with a very, very narrow list of conditions. And I may forget a couple here, but it's cancer, it's AIDS, it's the closest it comes to what I have, which does qualify mildly, is muscle spasms. So
Hmm.
there isn't any intractable pain. There isn't any PTSD. I don't know that there's any Crohn's or a lot of the things that even a little bit broader pain-based type of conditions would qualify for. So I've been very active in emailing my legislators. Listen, here's my story. Here's what I do. Here's
Right.
the only safe option that I've discovered in order to have pain relief and sleep. So I'm very actively supporting broadening the list of conditions that somebody could have to qualify. One of the dispensaries that will open here on July 1st is going to be in Minneapolis, so very, very close to me. And so that's my hope and prayer, is that either with what's written already, I will qualify because I do have spasms in the calf muscle. But if that does not work, then intractable pain will qualify me to be able to legally get what it is that's helped my quality of life.
So the sun is rising in Minnesota as far as relief for you. So that's pretty wonderful.
And relief for they're estimating about 5,000 other people. And so it's really exciting to see people on the news that have kids that have epileptic seizures, and the hope of a better life and more consistent health for those kids. That's what's most exciting to me, I think. Not that I'm some kind of a saint, but I mean, in the scheme of things, I don't have it that bad. And that's usually when you're most thankful, when you can compare your life to somebody else's and say, wow, at least it's not that crappy. And that's the reality of it. And that's the fun part of telling my story, where I've got friends and people that I tell my story to who say, wow, I was a little bit pissed that I had a stuffy nose today, but now that I remember that you don't have a foot, I feel a lot better. And so in those times, I'm glad that I can be an example.
And I want to go back to that fourth fateful accident, where you did lose the foot, and you brought us through the lessons of it's just a foot, and let's have a party and say goodbye to the foot, and Chachi's left foot Facebook page and all that. You just mentioned, I don't have it as bad as others. Talk about what you did with the driver, who hit you.
I knew early on that he was having a tough time. I did recall laying there on the ground and kind of looking back over my shoulder and seeing somebody run out of the car that had hit me, but I couldn't quite remember what face in the crowd that was. And so I do recall, as I'm laying there on the ground, screaming through bones sticking through skin, because it was a compound segmented fracture. Whatever wasn't sticking through the skin had been turned to dust. And I probably had to be scary to everybody around, and especially to the person that hit me. And so I heard early on that he was having a tough time, because my lawyer came in and he wanted to go after this guy to determine what his assets were in case we wanted to sue him. And so as that was going on, as he's discovering, going through this kid's life of tax returns and W-2s and bank accounts and asset discovery, that this kid is sending messages through my attorney to me. Tell Mr. Rutherford, I'm really sorry. I feel horrible. I'm not sleeping. I'm not eating. And I told my attorney early on, I want to give him a call. And he said, that's the worst thing we can do, because you're going to say something nice to him. And that's not what we need if we're going to end up suing him. So we're going to wait. So by the time all of the asset discovery and all that happened, I was already walking. I was already playing golf. I was already mountain biking. I was already enjoying the life and getting back to it after the pause button had been pushed. And my lawyer alerted me that there were some assets there, and they weren't insignificant, and that we would certainly win because he was clearly at fault. He was issued a ticket on the spot. And I said, nope, that's not how this ends. This doesn't end with me suing some 23-year-old kid and taking all of his assets and ruining his life and having him start over just because he's made a mistake or done something that I've even done since the accident in making an illegal turn or an illegal U-turn. Mm-hmm. This story ends with me taking him out for a beer. So I got his phone number and gave him a call, and he reluctantly agreed to get together for a beer. And it was a transformational evening for both of us, because he was living his life for the past few months convinced that he'd ruined somebody's life. He only saw me laying on the ground, knew that my lower leg was now missing. He figured that was a sentence to sadness and to a life of misery. But when he was sharing in the joy of, I'm mountain biking again, I'm golfing again, I'm walking, I'm doing the things that I loved to do before, he was able to share in that and realize he hadn't ruined someone's life. That I was thanking him for the experience because I now had a new outlook that no matter where you think the human body comes from, whether it was an explosion or like I do, that God created it all, the reality is the human body is a miracle. Being able to hold somebody that you love, being able to hear them, speak to them, see them, to be able to pick up a coffee cup, to be able to work the handlebars on a bike, it's all a miracle. The birds, the trees, the water, the engineer that can think up a BMW car, all of it is a miracle. And I was missing that before, Seth. And so when I wake up every day and my bike ride is full of all of this wonder and glory and amazing stuff, that is awesome. And I was missing that before. And so I was literally there to make sure he was okay and to thank him for the whole thing. And we left as pals. So we had a couple beers together and spent a couple hours together. And we've been in touch a number of times since. And now that we bring it up, it's long overdue. So that's the way that this was going to end. It wasn't going to end with somebody's life being ruined, because mine wasn't. And I wasn't going to just punitively try to hurt him over a simple, honest mistake.
I mean, you have made some decisions that other people just simply wouldn't make, but I don't know, maybe hearing this, folks will change the way that they make decisions, because your story is miraculous. You used a derivation of that word. I'll use it too, to say the least. So, as always, thank you for your time. I got two final questions for you. And they sound the same, but one is about cannabis. What's most surprised you in cannabis? And then life, and what's most surprised you in life? I have no idea what you're going to say to the second one, but just in terms of cannabis, what's most surprised you?
From where I sit, it feels like the speed. I know there are people that have been working on this for decades, but as long as I've been in this space, which I just celebrated my fourth year back at Boveda, yesterday, as a matter of fact,
happy anniversary,
is the speed. Thank you very much. And the speed that states are adopting medical, that are adopting or want to put recreational on the ballot. So I know that all of this has been in the works for a really long time, and like breaking rocks, you got to pound on that thing for a really long time until that one whack is the one that cracks it in half. And so thank you to all the people that have been working so diligently over the last 30 plus years. But it feels like it's happening quickly. And now that as those dominoes fall, so I'm really excited about the momentum. I'm surprised by that. What surprised me most about life? Well, that there is joy wrapped up in horrible situations, that sometimes joy and fantastic things show up in a package that's wrapped in sadness or in a negative experience. And so you just gotta, I don't know if you unwrap it or if you break it in half or what you do to that ridiculous analogy of a box. But once you're inside it, sometimes things that are blessings in your life come cloaked as something else.
That's pretty deep. Sometimes joy comes wrapped in sadness. I mean, wow. I don't even know what to say. I'm speechless. You did it. You've done it.
Okay, fantastic. Well, I want to go on record that at this time on the 19th of May 2015, Seth Adler was speechless for a couple moments. But that really
Totally.
is, and thank you for
Oh
saying
man.
that. I really appreciate that. But that truly is that, sometimes joy is wrapped as something else, and you just got to unwrap it.
There you go. Listen, Charlie. It's always good talking to you. I don't even have to tell you that. Thanks so much for your time today, and I'm looking forward to seeing you down the line.
I can't wait, my friend. It's been a great conversation, Seth. Thank you very much for having me.
Well, it's just a foot. I cannot see myself in that situation. I cannot see myself having a party to say goodbye to the foot. I cannot see myself making any of the decisions that Charlie Rutherford has made. However, I'm going to listen to this one again and see if my mind gets changed. It certainly was an enlightening conversation.